Helldivers 2, Mechs, and sweet, sweet managed democracy. Let's go.
Another week, boys, and another twid. This week in democracy, Helldivers, you just got your first ever real taste of a nerf. I know, some of you are like, Cross, this is terrible, this is awful. How do they expect us to play? And this is where I come in and say,
well, yeah, every single person in existence was using a railgun, so obviously it's gonna get nerfed.
Hey, this your first time? As a Destiny player, we have seen countless buffs and nerfs over the years.
As a Destiny player, you have also seen the game that you love crumble to small pieces that you can't even recognize, and all that you love turn into shit. So, you know, a small nerf like this, not exactly bad considering to what could have happened.
Unfortunately, Arrowhead just hit us with a pretty hefty nerf. Now, Palstead actually came out, who is the CEO of Arrowhead, to address this head on, which I have to respect. Quote, we want to continue our trend of clearly communicating what's going on with Helldivers 2. So here's our detailed design, thoughts around why we did balance changes to weapons the way we did. Presented by Arrowhead's old-timer Patrick Lasota. Now in the blog,
I absolutely love, by the way, when companies do this, when they explain the reasoning why they made changes. All companies that present reasoning why something needed to be changed are pretty much always the better games. Think about it. For example, Marvel Snap actually explains the reasoning why they nerf cards, and it's usually decent reasoning. You can understand it. Then there's shit games like Diablo 4, for example, or Starfield. Well, Starfield actually doesn't change anything about the game because who cares? But Diablo 4 is a great example of an absolute atrocious travesty of a game that just does things because random MacGuffin feelings why they should do things. And there are other examples that don't fit this. For example, Dota and League of Legends, that just do changes because they want to keep the game as fresh as possible and people playing always, you know, constantly finding new things. But when games do this and they actually explain why things need to change, that just means the developers know what's going on. And they probably understand why they're doing things, because chances are, maybe you got lucky and they played their own game.
blog post, Patrick states that he is the current head of product testing at Arrowhead and further expresses his desire for transparency with their players, and this involves the need for nerfs and buffs to keep the game entertaining over the course of its lifespan. He states, I have since the game release seen many who say don't nerf, only buff, and other similar ideas. However, as a designer, I can tell you this is not a great idea, but I understand where the sentiment comes from. All too often in the games industry, the core fantasy and what makes a weapon feel good and fun is ignored for the sake of balance. I believe players are scared of nerfs because it will ruin the fantasy of a weapon, ruin their fun. It is extra important to us to tread carefully so that we don't ruin fantasy and fun when we do nerfs. We hope you, our players, will tell us when we cross that line inadvertently. So yeah.
Oh, this is a hard thing to actually say because everything that becomes meta does technically fit under this fantasy thing that they're talking about. So that makes nerfing things harder if you're looking at it like that, but it kind of needs to be done. Again, how long have been people playing railguns on everything nowadays? You know, if you even slightly understand the game. A week? 2 weeks or something like that? It's been a long time. So obviously the fact that one slot of your weapons is literally always X, kind of bad.
I know, some PR talk here and there, guys. Listen, fellas, as someone who's played live games for years now, we have seen damage control from developers. Look no further than the state of the game from Destiny 2 last year, or Diablo and Blizzard with their first big patch leading up to the launch of Season 1. There are times where developers definitely shoot themselves in both feet. Today, though, I do want to go into detail, a break.
You know what I saw just today, which actually is perfect for this situation? Someone commented about Valve. Gabe does literally nothing, makes billions. Other companies constantly shoot themselves in the foot. What is this business strategy called? Because, no, seriously, look at Valve. Valve do almost literally absolutely nothing as a company. Everyone's happy. Everyone feels good about it. And no one's really complaining too much about anything, right? It's rare that there's anything even really big to complain about when it comes to Valve. But they don't do anything. They don't innovate. They don't give a shit about any of that. They can't even count the 3 most of the time. Pretty much ever, honestly, right? But other game companies, other competitors just constantly, for some reason, find shotguns and aim it at their feet and balls. How is... Man, makes you think, doesn't it?
Down of these nerfs, as well as the buffs. I want to talk about how things have changed in today's This Week in Democracy. Now let's start with primary weapons. Many players complain that primary weapons are not strong enough to deal with all types of enemies. Patrick states that this is intentional. They want you and your teammates to strategically utilize your stratagems for certain scenarios, rather than rely on raw DPS from primary fire. Now, the most notable of these changes.
Also, I want to say one thing about situations like this. It actually would make the game boring if you could just deal with anything and everything with X weapon or whatever, okay? Because then there's just no real risk. You see a Bile Titan going at you and it's whipping its dick out and you just shoot it one time and it's over? Kind of boring. But when you can't have a weapon that specializes in literally dealing with everything, there's risks. You know that if something appears, you kind of need to stress. You kind of need to, you know, evasive maneuvers and whatnot.
Is the nerf to Breaker. This is the SG-225 Breaker Shotgun. Now, this weapon quickly rose to the top of the primaries as the meta pick for most players. Patrick states, it was, however, not necessarily better at making you succeed in a mission, and no real damage nerfs were warranted. Now, the team wanted to keep the DPS of the weapon high at close range, while also playing into the fantasy of the Breaker being a powerful automatic shotgun that bucks wildly as you hose down targets in front of you. So Arrowhead has increased its recoil and decreased its ammo capacity, going from 16 shots to 13. Now, is this nerf noticeable? Well, keep in mind, Breaker is still a very good weapon. It still does very good damage, especially up close, but yes, reducing the max size is noticeable. Something that I would complain about, especially when I'm getting swarmed with enemies, is the reload animation of Breaker. And what this results in is this weapon running out of ammunition very fast. It's not just the magazine size that gets hurt, it's the overall ammo that you have ready to expend that also got hurt. That being its total damage, considering that ammo inside of Helldivers 2 is limited. Now, as far as recoil goes, is the increase here noticeable? It's kind of strange because it is, but I feel like it's probably going to be more noticeable depending on your input. For instance, controller players, you're probably going to feel this a bit more rather than us here on mouse and keyboard. And for mouse and keyboard players, I would argue and say you may not even notice it unless you're just really dialed into Breaker and you've been using it non-stop. Again, the most noticeable thing about Breaker is, of course, its mag size being decreased. Now, this also takes us to the Punisher. Arrowhead actually buffed.
Also, it's crazy how in some games, nerfing something by 1 or 2 works, but in other games it doesn't.
This weapon. It's a powerful pump shotgun, but as Arrowhead pointed out, it was being limited by its slow reload and fire rate. Surprisingly enough, there was actually a bug that affected Punisher that when you picked up ammo, you would literally only get half. Now, the damage per shotgun pellets was increased from 40 to 45, and they also increased total ammo capacity from 40 to 60, as well as the stagger force against enemies. Now, in our sandbox testing, we found that this was very strong against higher tier enemies. The pump functionality does still make it difficult to deal with swarms, though. I personally like to pair it with things like the Guard Dog Rover to help fend off waves of rank and file enemies, but overall, I think Punisher is a better option, especially considering they also patch the ammo, no longer halving when you pick it up. Now, this takes us to the Breaker Spray and Pray. Dude, this weapon would literally just tickle enemies. But Arrowhead states that Breaker Spray and Pray was intended to be an even wilder, more point and destroy version of the regular Breaker, something where pacing yourself would be even harder. Now, many complaints came out about this weapon, most notably that it just was not good for dealing with anything larger than a scavenger. But Arrowhead increased the fire rate from 300 to 330 rounds per minute, and his shotgun pellet per shot was brought up from 12 to 16. Now, does this mean this is better than the current Breaker? In our testing, I think it just presents itself as another option. Clearly, even after this buff, though, I would still take like pre-nerf Breaker over the Breaker Spray and Pray. How it compares, though, both Breaker and Breaker Spray and Pray in the current sandbox, in my opinion, Breaker is still better than Breaker Spray and Pray. Now, moving on to Railgun. Look, Railgun was like the go-to weapon, especially when dealing with automatons. Arrowhead states that it was vastly overperforming and how safe it was to use and how convenient it was, not requiring a backpack or assistance to be effective. and not requiring risk to take out even larger armor targets. So Arrowhead decreased the armor penetration in safe mode and decreased the damage against durable enemy parts. Now what this means is that in safe mode, guys, it is only capable of penetrating medium armor now, such as automaton scout walkers. It is also now ineffective at penetrating enemies with heavy armor, such as chargers and biotitans in safe mode. Now let me be clear, I always use railgun in unsafe mode, but now you have to use it in unsafe mode in order to do any damage to these enemy types. Now Arrowhead also nerfed ability to damaging massive body parts. So essentially now you have to aim for the head, as well as other weak points on enemies. Now in our testing, we still found that it's good against medium armor enemies, such as hive guards, which it can still one-shot. Anything above medium armor, this thing though is hot ass in safe mode. Fellas, don't use it in safe mode. Absolutely need to be playing in unsafe mode to make railgun usable. Now its shots just bounce off of charger armor now, and it takes significantly longer to kill biotitans. Honestly, you're better off just using stratagems to take care of these guys. Against Hulks, most shots just bounce off unless you hit them dead on in the eye. We're about to get to it, but you're actually better off just using the laser cannon when it comes to higher tier bot enemies. Now this also takes us to the laser cannon.
Damn, this is a lot of insight. Too much insight, honestly, arguably for most people.
Oh, this nerf talk, man. Let's get to something good.
Crazy.
From Arrowhead here, laser cannon's initial design was to be that of a machine gun, but with infinite ammunition. However, players were disappointed by the lack of armor penetration. You damn right we were. So Arrowhead buffed the laser cannon's damage versus massive body parts and increased armor penetration and gave it better ergonomics to make it easier to stay on target. In our sandbox testing, this is the railgun replacement. It can deal with Hulks, it can deal with chargers. Yes, you do have to shoot in the armored back of the leg now to kill. It also deals with striders and most other armor enemies very well. It's fantastic at taking down bot tanks when hitting the vent in the back. It's good. It's substantially better than where it was before. So guys, if you're playing this weekend, I would suggest giving the laser cannon a go. Now this takes us to another buff, this one hitting the flamethrower. Arrowhead states that there were many complaints that the flamethrower felt a little too anemic, as it not outputting damage at a rate that is warranted by a weapon with a shorter range and large volatility, such as the flamethrower. So they increased flamethrower's direct damage by 50% per second. Guys, flamethrower is very strong. It will cook waves of rank and file ads, especially against bug enemies. It can even kill a charger with about 3/4 of the mag. Now this takes us to the shield backpack. From Arrowhead here, the shield backpack is safety
way too OP
at the expense of a backpack slot. Unfortunately, the safety offered by the shield backpack was a bit too great, essentially allowing you to ignore many mechanics that contribute to the fun of Helldivers.
Yeah, again, they know what's up. See that? They understand that the risk and danger is fun at the end of the day. This is why games have bosses, okay? This is why games have enemies that cannot be instantaneously defeated when you just look in their general vicinity. Crazy situations, dangerous situations are really fun, and taking away that is probably one of the worst ideas ever, and this is why these balance changes are needed, if anyone's wondering. Yeah, if you want to go for some blah 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 perfect plays, Helldive difficulties and whatnot, yeah, you're probably pissed, but don't be. There's going to be a new meta at some point. Maybe it's going to be weaker. Hopefully it's going to be weaker than the previous one. But you're going to still have your, best in slot type of ideas, stratagems, and all of that stuff that you can do to succeed. If you want to be like that. But for most people, it's about that risk. It's about those unpredictable situations. It's about someone literally dropping on side of your head and, having a great day because of it.
Such as knockbacks, shockwaves, and giant explosions, obliterating you and your friends. So Arrowhead increased the time the shield needs before regeneration occurs if the shield is not broken. If the shield is broken, it will then take longer to regenerate than before, but still shorter than if it had not broken. Quote, to compensate for these extra times, the regeneration speed of the shield itself is near instant to max HP. Now in our sandbox testing, it takes roughly 11.44 seconds for the shield backpack to regenerate after going down. Pre-patch, patch, this was roughly 6.36 seconds. So yes, it's quite the nerf. Now, is the shield still good? Absolutely.
Yes.
But you'll definitely need to be a lot more conscious when that shield drops, considering you'll now have double that time before getting that shield back. Now, this takes us to our 120mm and 380mm barrages. Arrowhead stated that these were originally designed to act as an artillery storm that would deny entry to a specified area while raining down a powerful onslaught of rounds on enemy groups. Now, they have a longer active time than that of Eagle Strikes, but of course they're less accurate. Quote, they have, however, not delivered on the feel of being active much longer or the saturated area denial effect. They're also good at killing the piss out of your team, but Arrowhead has decreased their scatter area and gave them an extra salvo. In our sandbox testing, personally guys, I think these are still only really good for bug missions, primarily for taking out nests. In my opinion, I would still go with other strategies.
There's nothing wrong, by the way, in games like this, where you have, you have bugs, you have Roombas, one weapon being better against Hex and the other weapon being better against that. It also makes technical sense from a realism standpoint that some weapons would be good against these things and the other ones would be good against the lawnmowers. It just makes sense. You can't even blame them for that. And I think balance should never be kind of done about around the idea that, hey, this weapon needs to be good against everything type of deal. Nah.
Stratagems, but it is an option and better than what it was before. Now, Patrick closes out the blog post stating, I hope this gives you a greater insight into how we are thinking around balance and why we make the changes we have. Happy hell diving. Now, outside of the blog post covering nerfs and buffs, we also got new planetary conditions. In the patch notes, we see planetary hazards active, followed by mini planets now have additional environmental challenges that will appear at random while you are deployed, from fire tornadoes to meteor showers and many more. Now, we played a little one.
That's good. That's good. That just adds to the chaos. Again, the more chaos, in my opinion, the honestly better, right? Cannot be the only one who thinks like that.
This patch came out, and guys, no joke, these meteor showers, they don't mess around.
Ooh.
If you find yourself in the wrong spot when this event starts, prepare to get pinballed around right before you meet death. Now, in other news, Taiwan has been liberated, which means mechs are here, fellas. This was actually shared out yesterday on Helldivers 2 Twitter, stating that this is not a drill. Our factories are under attack, halting all output. Helldivers have been deployed to liberate Taiwan, and the liberation began soon after. You guys have literally done it in less than a day. Now, with Mechs being here, guys, we are going to be doing testing on
it makes sense because Mechs
this extensively, which is why we're not including the testing of Mechs here. I want to see exactly what Mechs can go up against, what it can take on. We will be showcasing that here in the next day, going over.
I'm really interested in how they're gonna make mechs work, because it's not. There's probably gonna be some situations. Again, I'm still very much in favor of Helldivers having these situations with how the story works and everything. That there's gonna be like super boss raid events with more than 4 players and whatnot, and that's gonna be pretty interesting, because mechs are gonna be kind of like artillery, as much as I understand currently. They're not going to be constantly a thing. They're going to have limited ammo and things like that, so if they run out of ammo, well, it is what it is. But it's kind of easy to incorporate them in game situations where a huge rush of enemies appear and then it's time for the mech or something like that. That could be really good and really easy to actually pull off.
Everything that our mechs can do. Now, on the topic of new stuff, we also got a new trailer showcasing the new war bond called Cutting Edge that will be coming out next week on March the 14th. This war bond will include a ton of new weapons and armor for Helldivers.
That's pretty cool, but it is what it is. Anyway, outs the cross, baby. And this was Chris Said. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.